Hello everyone, in this video we're going to cover the basics of JavaScript. So let's go and actually figure out what JavaScript is actually about. So last time we actually were having this script.js, and this script.js we were console logging hello world from the script file, and we were doing it in the console here. Let me actually click on preview, and as you see it says hello world from the script file. That means that our script file is working fine and it's connected to our index.html file. So what are the basics of JavaScript? In any programming language, if you come from any other programming language, you probably figured out that there is something very important called variables. And variables are pretty much essential in any programming language. And if you're new to programming, let me explain to you what variables are. Variables are like a data structure, and if you don't understand what a data structure is, it means like it's a data storage. So they are like data storage to store your values. So let me explain to you and show you what I mean here. So they store, for example, a value like a number, and then you can use them later on in code. So first of all, you to create a variable, you use the word var, and then you would use a name for your variable, and that name has requirements. But for now, I'm gonna call it my var, and then I'm gonna tell you what these requirements are for your variable name. Then my name, my var, is the name of my variable, and I'm actually going to set an equal sign, and here this is called an assigning operator. Means that you're telling JavaScript my var has to store a number, has to store a value of something, and that something, for example, let's say a number, I'm gonna store 100 in that number, and you end your line with a semicolon. If you come from other languages, a semicolon, for example, in C++ and C and Java, semicolon is a must. You need to actually have a semicolon. Other than that, it will give you an error. But in JavaScript, it's optional. If you have it, it's cool. It makes things easier for the interpreter to interpret your code. But if you don't have it, still the code will still work fine. So if I remove it, that does not change anything. And if I have it, it changes nothing, but it's good to have a very clean code to begin with. So var, my var, you're telling it now that you are having a my var as a variable, and you're telling JavaScript that you're storing 100 inside of this variable my var. So to see if that actually works, we can do the same console log, where we console log something to our console, and instead of typing a text that we like hello world like we just did, this time we are actually gonna say my var right away, and you can see here on the right side on my console it says 100, which means that 100 will stored clearly in my var, which is pretty cool. That means that my var now has 100 and you can use it anywhere in your code. So that's the first thing. So second thing, we can actually change that value. For example, let's say I did, I make an operation. I mean, first I have my var, and then I set it to 100, and then I did something with that, like an operation, a calculation or something. We're gonna get into that, and how to do calculations and all of that. But then after I've done my calculation, or printed it to the screen as I'm doing here, I want to change my var to be something else, because I'm in a point of time that I want to change that to something else. So you just use my var without the var, because var here means that you're declaring it for the first time, but now it's already been declared, so we can use it right away without the var keyword. And I reset it again using the assigning operator that I just mentioned to something else. Let's say 30. Let's say something changed and now the value is 30. Let's say it's a percentage and it was 100%, and now it's 30, and I want to still see if that really changed. And I would go and print this out again and see what's going to happen. And as you can see, let me clear this for you to see from scratch here on a clean screen. It prints first 100 on line 4, as you see, and then on line 9 it prints 30, which means that the assigning is working perfectly and we're changing our 100 to 30. Pretty cool. Okay, so that's a first basic of JavaScript, that you can assign variables to values to variables, and then you can use them, and then you can change those values as well to other values if something happens, or if that in that point of time you want to some calculation happens and your variable changes. Let me give you an example of what I mean. For example, your phone battery, right? It starts at 100 if you charge it till 100%. And that means that inside of your phone there is a variable that is listening to some sensor that's telling your phone that your battery is 100%, and it's printing it to you on the screen that it's 100%. And as it drops, the sensor does something and tells your phone that the battery is dropping, so that variable changes and it's being printed to your screen, so you know, oh, it's 90% now, it's 30%, and so on until 5%, and then it gives you a message that you need to charge your phone, and so on. Pretty cool, huh? So that's the thing about variables. But variables as well can also not just have numbers, but also can have other types. So what can we store in a variable? Let me comment these and I'll tell you what a comment is later on. Comment means that this code is not going to be executed, or whatever you type in a comment is just there so you can see it, but it's not going to be executed by your interpreter or by your JavaScript interpreter. So you have here my var is equal to 100. So let me change this value. Instead of saving a number, I want to save text. Remember when I console logged right away hello world from the file or from the script and all of that? What if I don't want to type it inside of the console log like I did last time when I said hello world from the script, right? Imagine I don't want that. I don't want to do that, right? But I want this to be inside of the variable, and then I would use the variable to print it out. So what we do is I could set here the text. Let's say hello world from the text from the script, and you might be finding out that if I try to run that right now, it gives me an error right away. And you're probably asking, you just said we could have text, we could console log it to, just like we did whenever we said hello world, or whatever, whenever we tried to print the variable. So what is going on here and why it's giving an error? So the reason behind that is that whenever you want to type text and save it inside of a variable, or even print it here, you can't just type text, because JavaScript is going to assume, if you have something on the right side of this assigning operator, that it's a value or an identifier. So a value could be a number or could be text, but the text has to be in quotations like that. So now JavaScript understands what is going on. This is a string and so on. But if you don't have quotations, that means that JavaScript is going to assume that it's a number or a variable, that is a number or a variable in another variable, which means, let me show you. Let me create another variable. I'm going to call it my var2, and I'm going to set it, for example, to 22, and then I am going to create my var. I'm not going to set it. We could do that. It's going to be an we could actually set a variable, but we can never assign it at first if we want to. Let me show you actually something. If I reload right now and we're trying to print my var, which has no value, we're gonna get, what do you think we're gonna get? We got an undefined. An undefined value means that we have a variable and we never even set it before, so it's an undefined. So it's there, but it's not defined. So to define it, we can, since we already declared it, we can use my var, and then we could set it to a number as we did before, like that. Okay, it's gonna say 20, or we could set it to a string between quotations. I am a string, okay, which is some text. Let me clean that. Or, and rerun this, is gonna say I'm a string. Or I could set it to be another variable, which is, for example, here my var2, and that will bring me to the point of understanding how variables work, which means I can assign a variable to another variable and get its value from it. So now we see 22 is in my variable, and my variable 2 is actually 22, so we got its value. So this is the reason whenever we try to say hello world as a text, we got an error, because JavaScript, if we don't have that between quotations, it will try to think that this is actually a variable name, and of course that's not a variable that we have. That's why it's giving you an error. See? That's why. Now it works since we're already using something that we declared. Okay, so we have something about variable names. We have requirements for variable names that are very important to know. So you see here I have my var as a name, but someone might think that I might say that my var, instead of having it this way, I could type it this way. What do you think? This is gonna give me an error, because you can't say my var, because there are requirements to the variable names, and first, you don't have spaces in variable names, because JavaScript is gonna assume that this is actually a keyword, and then this is another keyword, and that it's gonna find that JavaScript doesn't have anything in its syntax like that, and it's gonna give you an error. So JavaScript here will give you an error saying that this is not an identifier name that has to do with my requirements for identifier names. So we don't have spaces. So as you see in the second one here, let me bring this to be my name, my var. In the second one here, you'll see that I have a number, my var2. So that means that we can use numbers in variables, correct? That's correct. We could use numbers in variables, but we cannot start with a number. For example, let's say 1, 2, my var. Okay, that now it says identifier starts immediately after numeric literal, which means the requirements here for a variable, you cannot have that. You cannot have a number starts, a variable starts with a number, but you can have it in the middle. You can have it, let me clean that. You can have it in the middle. Okay, now because my var2 is not defined, so that's why it's giving me an error. But if I get this to work like that, you see it works. You could have it in the middle, or you could have it in the end, just like I had before. So another thing about variables that are very important is that is variables case sensitive or not. And probably if you're new to programming, you are gonna ask me, what do you mean by case sensitive? So I mean, is my var, let me type it in the comment, is my var the same, that's just a comment, okay, I'm just typing English here. My var is the same as my var. So are both of these the same? So let's test this out. Okay. So let me clean that. Or let me have it, since we're still explaining this point. So I have here my var, right? And I'm setting my var to be my to var, right? So can I say my var is equal to my to var, and then I'm gonna print my var, which is now, if they're the same, that means that we have to get 22, since this one is the same as this one, and we're setting it to 22 since my to var is actually equal to 22. That means that my var should actually output here 22. So let me print this and see. Okay, gave me undefined, which means that my var is not exactly the same as my var, because its case JavaScript is case sensitive, which means the v small is actually different than the v capital, and those are two different variables now. Which means if I get this back to my, I'll still get with a small m, I'll get 22.